off this afternoon a great panel discussion. As you can see from the bios, we've got a great diversity of experience, large firm, small firm, and to bring to you information and experience about what it's like to be an executive search in these different firms and where they came from. But I want to introduce our moderator of the session, my colleague Ben Ashwell, and Ben is our Senior Media and Publications Manager. So with that, Ben, take the stage.
All yours. Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Great, thank you. So I thought I'd start off, we obviously got to hear from all of you the little introduction. As Brian said, I'm the Senior Publications Manager with the AESC. Something about me that only my friends know is that I was named after Michael Jackson's pet rat. For any of you who are familiar with the Jackson 5 song, Ben. I'm moderating today's panel, which is called Tomorrow's Talent Today. As we saw earlier today, we have a diverse range of people in the room with a diverse range of experience, and I think we have a pretty diverse panel as well. This is very important because, as we all know, research are very different from search firm to search firm, to capture a range of perspectives through our panelists today. The objective of the panel is to look at how research function has evolved, how it's changed, where it's come from, and where it's going. And we also want to highlight some career opportunities for all of you in the room. So, starting with Florrie, if I can hand it over to all of you to introduce yourself, your role, the firm that you work for, and maybe something about you that only your friends know.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here today with you all. I'm Tori Wallace. I'm currently Director of Research with the virtual global firm Kincannon and Reed. Our firm focuses on food, agribusiness, and life sciences. And I began working in executive search way back when, in 1990, working for the DC office of Heidrick and Struggles, initially as an executive assistant. And so I've worn the hat of executive assistant, office administrator, research associate, and personnel director of research at Kincannon and Reed. And let's see, you asked about something others would know. My picture was on the Girl Scout cookie box when I was a kid.
Excellent. Josh, if you'd like to.
Sure. So Josh Clarke with Heidrick. So I guess a little bit of background. I started executive search in 2001 as a research associate with a now defunct retained search firm. I left search for a few years and rejoined with Heidrick in 2008, not 2006. Time flies. I'm a partner in our global technology and services practice. I also lead our big data and analytics practice. Something that most people don't know about me, I once was able to swim across end-to-end Lake George in New York as part of a broader group. So it's my fun.
My name is Wendy McLeod. I've been with Witt Kieffer since 2001 and was working for one of their competitors when one of the partners needed someone to assist her. So came to Witt Kieffer as an administrative assistant, worked very closely with research then, and have kind of grown up with the firm, continuing to grow, and it's been a great ride, great people within the organization that I've learned a lot from. I think what most people, only a few of even my close friends know, is that well, everyone knows that I like to work out, but I've done some competitions. I've done a couple of competitions in the past, and another one coming up in the spring, so don't tell me about it. You can't Google my name to find that out, because I changed my name to do it.
Paul Ciancarelli from CTPartners. I have some fellow colleagues out here today, so great to see everyone. I've been at the firm 7 years, part of the financial services and HR practices. Grew up in research, did it for about 2.5 years. And, based in the Boston office, what you might not know about me, I'm a new dad. I've got a 4-month-old at the house. I haven't worked out. 4 months. And,
You've been busy.
Yeah, so good to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, and congratulations, Paul, on your new additions. The first question I wanted to pose to all of you is, research today, how has the research functioned since you've been in research, and how it's changed? Florrie,
Sure. So the question, how has the research function changed over the years? I think first we need to sort of draw a distinction that term research, as it relates to executive search, can mean different things to different people. To me, I kind of draw a distinction between doing the name generation, identifying those candidates to be contacted, and then doing candidate development. And I know that in some firms, they have their researchers do both, and about 50-50 in terms of their time. And then others, those two responsibilities are separated, and some people may be doing just or mostly name generation and sourcing, and then others may be doing most of the candidate development and qualifying the candidates. So I'm interested first in seeing a show of hands. How many of you are doing both name gen and candidate development pretty much equally? Okay, maybe about a quarter or a third. How many are doing mostly name generation, finding the candidates that someone else then will contact? Okay, I guess about a third there too. And then doing mostly candidate development where somebody else identifies those people and you take it from there. Okay, interesting. And I think we had a few who didn't raise their hands. Is there something I missed there? Okay, well anyway, that's helpful to know. When I began, I would say that the people who are doing name generation would find names from printed directories and and Laura Stokes actually mentioned going to the library physically to find those printed directories. There were CD-ROMs. I remember when CD-ROMs came out, and that was a really big deal. Of course, the telephone was really very, very valuable, more valuable then, I would say. It maybe is an art that has been a bit overlooked lately, but that's always a great resource for finding candidates. And then on candidate development, of course, the phones are always there. I think everybody had executive assistants way back when. They had to get past that gatekeeper. Now folks have voicemail. Their calls go directly to voicemail. But I remember communications where you have facsimile and FedEx, and candidates would send their resumes through snail mail. So obviously things have changed a lot, and we've got all kinds of great internet resources. I can remember when we got computers that had internet access. That was a really big deal, and you're all learning, oh gosh, you can get the news on the computer? Wow. So it's definitely changed a lot over the years.
Sure, would any of our other panelists like to?
I would just say, going along with our earlier speaker, that social media has just changed everything tremendously. I mean, that's where most of us got names before, was lists. And now, you know, as a, not quite a consultant, but a senior associate, I work very closely with my researcher, but I can do a lot of that on my own too, you know, through LinkedIn. So the internet has totally changed the way we do business.
Sure, and I'd love to delve into that a little bit deeper and get a feel for how you use technology today and whether the evolution of technology has helped or hindered the research function within your firm. Paul, I don't know if you'd like to kick us off on that.
I'm happy to. Well, I think we would all agree that LinkedIn's become a pretty powerful tool.
Sir, can you get closer to the microphone, please?
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
much better.
Okay, great. I would say LinkedIn's pretty powerful. At the end of the day, clients hire a retained firm for access, perspective, and judgment. And I think the access part, that field has been leveled a bit with the evolution of LinkedIn. So I think the onus is on the research associate or the researcher to find ways to add value with LinkedIn, but also beyond that. And it may be something like getting more involved in the target market, the search strategy, being more creative with the source environment, and just finding ways not just to find a name and pass it off, but to understand why you chose to show that name to someone and explain why you think it's a potential prospect.
I was going to ask you, would that also include involving the associate in your BD prep? Your business, if you're doing a pitch, involving them in developing intelligence for your BD prep as sort of a foundation or a launch pad, then into the search, you get the search, they're already in some ways ready to go.
we do that at Witt Kieffer very often. We'll spend time with our researcher before we go to what we call a shootout, and they'll do a lot of background information on the firm or the organization itself, news, they pull news media for us, and even target lists that we can have potentially to tell our clients or our potential clients, you know, we have done some homework and this is where we would go.
I understand there's more and more of that across the industry, the search industry, just because of the competitive nature that a lot of firms are going in prepared, and maybe they've already, they may have in hand some folks that they'd like to mention blindly, as Brian aptly pointed out about the candidate bill of rights. We're not going to be presenting people who don't even know about the opportunity, but we may, our firm may kind of redact the name, title, and just very, in general terms, talk about specific individuals who could be potential candidates when were we awarded the search.
Yeah, just sort of industry happenings. That's because I just participated in one, and it was really more about there's been a big shift in tide over the last couple of years, and just having that information helped them get
Great.
Excellent. I'd love to know from all of our panelists, and Florrie, thank you for providing an overview. I'd love for all of you to provide an outline of what the research function does in your firm and what is required to excel as a great researcher. I don't know whether Josh, if you'd like to do something.
Sure, happy to. Does this sound okay? I think research is evolving. There are a number of researchers here from Heidrick, so you guys probably know better in the trenches what it's like today. But just a little bit of background and historical context. When I joined the firm 8 years ago, I don't believe there were any research associates left at Heidrick in North America. The role had been eliminated or consolidated. We have a research organization, a captive research organization, and a set of colleagues in India called the Knowledge Management Center that drives a lot of the day-to-day information collection and gathering and some of the broader research efforts. And much of the role of the researcher had been integrated, as Florrie mentioned, into the role of the associate, so that became a blended role. And that's a change I think is a good one, by the way. Integrating research in every step of the process is so critical. As the firm has continued to grow, as the market has rebounded, as the market for executive search has become, has grown over the last few years, we've started hiring more and more researchers in specific practice areas. At a headline level, and I think that this is maybe something where, if I can put in a shameless plug for Heidrick, we look at researchers not as a distinct group of people or a discrete function. We really see researchers as potential future partners in our firm. And when we make hiring decisions for researchers, when we bring them in, it's a foundation training, it's a development, but we're always trying to get people to move up that track, move into become more associate and client focused, and to ultimately become consultants in our firm. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest shifts that I've seen since I started as a research associate in 2001, when that wasn't necessarily the way the world worked at the time.
I'm curious, do you have career researchers that don't want to move up within the firm, or is that basically you have them keep moving?
I hesitate to say definitively. There may be. But I think by and large, no. Is there a place for a career researcher at Heidrick? Potentially. But I think it's really more in the career kind of associate engagement manager role, which is, like I said, a hybrid role as it is. But a pure research role, I don't think there is. We're really trying to kind of develop that kind of future kind of level and level everybody up over time. That's the focus.
And that's good to learn from the very beginning, because you can learn to do your own sourcing and your own research as well as you move up within your organization.
And Paul at CTPartners, what does it take to decide that?
Yeah, similarities and differences to what Josh mentioned at Heidrick. The research function, similar to at Heidrick, is a critical function for the firm. We've had a number of good success stories of people that have grown up there and gone on to associate director and principal and partner, actually. globally. When I think about the research function, I thought Josh brought up a good point. It's not a discrete or distinct function, it's part of the team. So on any one given assignment, you have your partner, the consultant, you've got a recruiter, you have a researcher, and you have an EA, an executive assistant. And that 4 to 5 person team is really coming together to solve your client's issue. On the research end, a more experienced researcher is expected to be able to put together or at least provide input and collaborate for the formulation of a target market. And I would argue that a good researcher who understands our business will challenge the rest of their team to expand it or to shrink it or to think creatively about how do we maybe create a second bucket or a third bucket of potential talent. So the target market, it's name identification, it's explaining why you think someone looks relevant and why we should prioritize that call over someone else at that organization. So it's thinking critically and practically. And then finally, we're a knowledge industry, we're a knowledge business. I think what really can separate good from great is how do we institutionalize that? How do we save it, capture it, and organize it in such a way where our colleagues or that individual can use it 8 months from now? We have a very similar assignment. We didn't know we were going to get 8 months before, but creating scale and efficiency is something I think as an industry we could all improve upon.
If I can just follow up, you asked the question, what makes a good researcher, and I think, while there are different models and there's no right or wrong model, I think every firm finds what works for them. One of the things that I think is becoming more and more important, regardless of what your role is tying your work back to the client and in the client situation. Information or access to information has become democratized over the last, since I've been in search over the last 13 or 14 years. It used to be a differentiator to say, well, we could find this name. If you just find that name, anyone else can probably find that name, and they may be able to find something else about that person that you missed. And it's not enough to just bring a name or just bring research. You've got to be thinking through, I think as Paul suggested, why is this bringing value, and what's the broader story that we're trying to tell about this individual. Why are we targeting this individual? What's the backstory or the context? And I think that contextualization and aligning a candidate to a client need from the first stage of identification really helps to distinguish a researcher from a human search engine.
And Josh, leading on from that question, and actually Florrie, I wonder if you'd like to speak to this a little bit. In this kind of competitive marketplace, what can a modern researcher do to kind of stay ahead of the curve, to stay current and stay possible ahead of the curve?
Sure. Well, I think it's always good, certainly in terms of name generation, to try to, as you know, technology is always changing, as Laura so aptly demonstrated today in the AERS presentation. There are lots of great blogs that you can follow to show the latest and greatest tips. A couple that I like to follow are, there's one called Boolean Black Belt by Glenn Cathy. Does anybody follow that blog? It's really quite useful, I think, related to internet research, and a couple of others related to internet research. A woman named Irina Shamaeva does some internet research sourcing, well, she does sourcing certification now. And Shally Steckerl is another name of a big internet researcher for all of HR, but obviously there are a lot of great applications for executive search. So those are just some ideas for name generation, and of course any professional development that you can do, like being here today, is really great for sharpening your axe.
Great. Wendy, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, making sure that you stay on top of reading materials so that you can, Modern Healthcare, everybody knows the People magazine of healthcare, so that helps. Conferences are great. One of the things that we have been talking about at our firm that we have not yet implemented, but I think would be really good, is for our researchers to go with us on the startup meetings. We occasionally have the associate who basically does the candidate development go on those startup meetings, but I think it would be so beneficial for the researcher to really be there, see it, touch and feel the clients and the organization as well. I think that would be great for them.
Sure. Paul or Josh, would you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay, excellent. Cool. Well, then we'd like to move on and get to learn a little bit more about your own personal experiences, build some story around, some of these assignments you've worked on, most enjoyable assignments, or most challenging assignments, and why. And Paul, I wonder if you'd like to start.
I'll take the first half of that question, my experience and what I've enjoyed most. Obviously, the diversity of our work I've always found interesting. Different clients, different business segments, different product areas, all within a certain industry. When you've been around long enough to see multiple verticals of that, and see the big picture, it really starts to become tangible and interesting to me. Most enjoyable assignment. I want to single out a client here. I will say some of the more difficult ones that I've worked on, in hindsight now, are the most enjoyable because I know they were the hardest to crack. And I know that they came to us because they couldn't fill the role on their own, and it was just a really difficult problem that the client had. In hindsight, a senior product search in a remote part of the country or a very expensive part of the country with limited talent in that city, that's a search that comes to mind is very enjoyable. Most challenging, we have a really exciting global head of HR search going right now that reports to the CEO, and the management committee is actively, daily involved. And the amount of feedback they provide on candidate interviews and how they communicate that to us, it's just completely blown the cover off any client interaction that I've ever had. They're very demanding, but very thoughtful, very, very, very strategic, and they're great recruiters, great assessors of talent. And sometimes our clients are, and sometimes they aren't. In this case, they are, and it's forced us to raise our game, and it's been quite challenging.
Wendy, I wonder if you'd like to speak to that.
Sure. I would say one of my most enjoyable assignments was one I did I guess it's been about 3 years ago. We had a person who was working for V.E. Smith as an interim CEO for a small community hospital, and they needed a whole senior leadership team. So we recruited a chief executive officer, financial officer, and nursing officer. It was a challenge because it was a very public entity and open meetings to the press, and the CEO was on the page of the newspaper every single day. Very similar to your position, very, very over-involved board, which we had to learn to manage. But we put a great team in, and the hospital was actually losing money. The CEO has turned that organization around. The CNO and CFO have since left. I think they were great for what he needed right at the time, but the CEO brought in a couple of other people for those roles and has mentored someone to step into his role. He's now looking for his next role. So that was one of my most enjoyable, turning something around that was so important to the community. They had no competitors. They had a couple of critical access hospitals, like 50 miles away, but the community needed the hospital, and it was really on a downhill slide, so he's turned that around. So that's been great. I would say my most challenging assignment, you're only as good as your last search. So when you have a search that goes bad, or you can't fill it, or you get down, I was telling my folks at my table today, I shouldn't have checked email, because when I did, I found out we got down to offering a candidate a job, and he accepted a counter offer. I mean, and we've been doing this for almost a year. It's been a very difficult search. So those are the challenges that I have. But like you said, you learn from them, and they end up being enjoyable once you finally get the right person in there.
I've got two short stories that I think speak to research, and how research is, in my mind, it's part of everything we all do at any level throughout the search. And also how much research has changed, at least from my perspective. So one, this goes back a few years ago, working with a big investment banking company here. I'm not a financial services guy, but they wanted to find somebody to lead their infrastructure and public-private partnership advisory group. And I was involved because of my experience in the consulting sector. And it would have been easy to just default to kind of the usual suspects and the targets and just drill into that universe. But what the client was really looking for was fresh thinking, fresh perspective for their organization. And because I was applying some basic research skills to my candidate development activity, I came across two firms that actually effectively sit across the table from the big investment banks on behalf of state and local governments to negotiate these public-private partnership deals. This had not been on our radar, not been on anyone's radar on the team within Heidrick. Our client hadn't mentioned it or brought it up. Through that channel, we were able to find a candidate who was passionate about the sector, was deeply connected, had this great track record, ended up being a placement. And I use that as an example because it gets easy to fall into our ruts. And that was a good example of kind of breaking out and just saying, okay, let's just think more holistically about where this talent might reside from a pure research perspective. And from an impact perspective, the reason I love this story, I always tell people this is when I fell in love with search, and I've been doing it for a long time, and I left it, hated it, come back to it, and enjoyed it. But this search made me fall in love with search because what became clear to me when we completed this project, just think about the impact we were able to have. Obviously, our client was happy and they were successful, and that's great. But this is a massive investment bank that's full of investment bankers. We were able to introduce the right type of candidate who is deeply embedded and passionate about actual public-private partnership and state and local governments, and bring a different set of perspectives to that conversation. So that individual was able to have a huge impact, outsized impact on the client in a real way. By the way, him going from his small little consulting firm to this big investment bank more than tripled his compensation, which had huge impact on him personally and his family. And that's kind of cool. And the downstream impact that that search had on all those inevitable public-private partnerships that get funded on the market. So all of us, kind of the roads we drive, it really crystallized for me, kind of, again, why I get excited about search. The other example, this is a really short one, but I think it's kind of funny about how things have changed. We're doing a CEO search for a SaaS company in healthcare technology, and we were really struggling to uncover people who had created companies, sold them into the big healthcare tech players. And we wanted to make sure we were being as comprehensive as possible. And we were struggling to build that list from a research perspective. And one night, I pulled out this device here, this research device. I pressed the button for Siri to come on, and I just started talking to Siri. And I was saying what I wanted. And lo and behold, I got a map that somebody had created, a visual map of every acquisition and roll-up that had happened over the last 10 years in healthcare IT, like a visual representation, including sale price, including who the CEO was, kind of boiling down to these 5 companies who basically own most of that market. This was something we'd never found. We were trying to manually create it, and Siri did all the research for us. So,
Add that to our search list. Siri.
Literally, it was just like, it was like 11 o'clock at night. I was like, all right, Siri. And I just started saying things, and it gave it to me. So, I love Siri.
Sure. Well, I've been director of research for quite some time now, so it's been a while since I've worked on searches myself in the research function, but one that comes to mind as being really enjoyable was shortly after our firm we went from a really sad kind of database called ACT to an executive search database called DeskFlow Enterprise that would let us first search on keywords in resumes and against function and industry and geography, etc. And this was a search for a lemon product manager for Sunkist. And there, in searching all of those functions I just mentioned in the database, I came across a really old resume that had been uploaded by our founder from a rising star who had said, I know I'm not ready to be ready to be one of your firm's placements, but I'd like to get into your database and keep touch with you. And anyway, so his name came up when I did these keyword searches, and I was able to track him down, and he ended up being our placement, and just a really, really great guy. And he's still there, has made a real impact there for Sunkist. And so just finding him the way he came across, we would not have found him had we still had ACT probably. We may have found him another way, but he wasn't out there on the web or anything. So anyway, that was a great instance of an enjoyable search for me. And as far as the ones that have been more challenging, I hear a lot from the senior associates on our team, when the client doesn't know exactly what they want, it makes our job so much harder. And I see a lot of head shaking here. And I know that becomes an issue of client management, really. And that's something that we are continually trying to improve on, to help the client understand what it is that they want early on in the process, so that we don't have to shift our focus as we go along further in.
Great, and it's very clear that you come from very diverse backgrounds, focus on different areas. But I would love to know if you could all share maybe some advice or that you may have received from a colleague or a peer, maybe if you've benefited from internal mentoring in any firm that you've worked in, or if the relationship has gone the other way now, that you have advice that you'd like to share with people. Maybe Paul, if you'd like to pick us off with that.
I think the biggest piece of advice I could give you all, and it worked for me, is as a researcher with a couple of years of experience, or maybe your early days in your career, and you're excited by the industry and think you want to make a career out of it, it was natural for me to want to create a niche and a specialty. And I had to really challenge myself to keep thinking more broadly and to develop a foundation. What I mean by that is, don't pigeonhole yourself too early in your career and different firms operate differently. Some have a more dedicated model than others in terms of who you're aligned to. But try to work with as many partners and teams within a practice that you're interested in as possible. You're going to get exposure to new styles and different clients and how to handle different objections and just different problem-solving cases. So I think for me as a researcher, I worked in the financial services practice. I didn't just do asset management or wealth management. I also did banking and insurance and retirement. And there were times when, I felt like I wish I could work on the same search twice to do a really good job and try to leverage what I had done previously. And you'll eventually get that opportunity. So take time early days to really build that foundation and work with as many people as you can.
So I would say the best advice I got from a colleague was go back to school. I did not have a degree when I moved into this role, and so I was an adult learner going back to school, working full-time, and it has benefited me tremendously. So, and in addition to that, having a mentor within your organization, formal, informal mentors, ask people if they will work with you as a mentor. I mean, it will help you tremendously. Kind of to Paul's point, you get a very diverse perspective, and look for people that you can mentor. I mean, there are always people who are who can learn from all of us. We are always learning, and we always have something to offer. So really reach out, find your own mentor, and reach out to others and ask if they would like a mentor. It helps you tremendously as well.
I think the feedback and the coaching that I've received over the years and that I've tried to share with others kind of boils down to a couple of key themes. One is to how important research is never going to go away. The role is going to change. I can guarantee that. The title may change, kind of how it gets integrated, but the criticality of that research mindset and approach to solving our clients' problems is absolutely mission critical, and it's a differentiator for everyone. And so keep that in mind, and then also keep in mind that the role you play as a researcher can have kind of outsized impact on the search and on our clients. Don't just work in go fetch mode, but help to guide and shape the search and the outcome. Use what you're learning to guide that outcome, because you, in many cases, know more than anyone else who's working on that project, including the client, because of the work you're doing. And then the last bit of advice I give, and this is a bit counter to kind of the structured approach that I think you need to take when you do research, is get comfortable living in the gray zone. I think one of my frustrations in my career as I've grown is kind of getting over that hurdle of, well, this is how you do research, and this is the approach we're taking, and this is the answer has to be here. And then the reality is that it's almost never there. When you're looking over here, you need to be thinking about what's not in the bucket. And taking that kind of hybrid approach to hyper-structured and very fluid, I think will help you all be very successful.
So at Heidrick, my mentor, my former boss, really encouraged me to continue to make contributions. And I guess I would share the advice with everyone here that make yourself valuable to your firm, not only with your search team on your searches, but are there firm-wide contributions that you can be making and be given more responsibility. And if you really contribute to the firm, there may be more opportunities for you to grow within that firm. And then I'd also just like to share from my most favorite mentor, my father, who has told me on numerous occasions, when you leave an organization, you still get to take with you everything you learned there, all of your experience, all of the professional development that you did there, and you can build on that in your next position. And so just make the most of it and learn as much as you can wherever you are.
Thank you. And I think one of the objectives of today is transparency and all sort of learning from each other and being open. And so I would love to know, speaking honestly, what things that you love about the search business, and maybe maybe something that you don't so much like, or you struggle with from time to time. Paul, again, maybe you'd like to start something.
Yeah, I think the core of what we do is what gets me most charged up. And what I mean by that is, as a consulting firm, which is at the end of the day what we are, maybe we're not strategy consulting, but we're still consulting. We're providing expertise and market insight to clients who desperately need it. So if you do a great job on execution, you're going to have that market intel and the commentary and the data to help solve a problem for your client. So just that whole dynamic alone is what gets me most excited, having a need and you being the one who have the power and the influence to help solve that need. That's what I like. And then challenging, I think the toughest part about what we do, from my own view, is we have multiple masters to serve. We have more than one client, and we have lots of priorities internally and externally. And every client deserves to be treated with in a timely and transparent fashion. And it can be challenging at times to juggle that and make every client feel like they're the only client that matters. So, yeah, happy to expand, but there you go.
Right.
So what I like best about my day is the diversity that I have. I can go into the office and I can either make phone calls, I can write, I can do research on my computer. I can do references. There's just a variety of things that I can do, and I like that about my day. What I don't like, or I guess I should say what is most challenging for me, I'm a pretty good communicator, and I can write things out and communicate well in a written way, but I have had a challenge writing position specifications and narratives that we do on candidates. So getting the information from my client, exactly what they need, and then writing that out in a document, I do it. It's my least favorite thing to do because it's a challenge for me. So I need to do it more so that I can get better at it and not hate it. Don't tell my clients that.
Well, I guess this will crystallize a comment I made earlier about what made me love search. And I'll be a little bit of a shill here for Heidrick. We have a kind of philosophy right now where we remind ourselves that we're helping our clients change the world, one leadership team at a time. It's something that we embrace as a firm, and while that's trademarked to Heidrick and Struggles, I think it's true of everybody. All of us in this industry, if you take a step back, that's what we're doing. We're not, maybe we're not the ones changing the world, but we get to play a role helping facilitate our clients having huge impact in the world every day, and that's pretty powerful stuff. We're really lucky to be able to do this and have huge impact on people. That impact that we can have is pretty, again, it's pretty meaningful and powerful. To take a step back and get out of the minutia, we have transformative impact on our clients and our candidates, everyone we engage with every day. That's pretty powerful. There's nothing I don't like about it.
Really?
There are things that are annoying. No, but no. This is, and now will be a show for AESC. This is a super exciting industry. I mean, we're the luckiest people on the planet. If you don't think that, you need to start thinking that. And you need to open your eyes at what we get to do every day, all of us with our clients. Even if it's some random job in some random place and it doesn't feel all that meaningful, it's really powerful what we get to do every day. And it's awesome.
So as the director of research on the panel, what I enjoy most about my job is really getting to empower our senior associates and research associates to be successful in serving our clients. And there are lots of different ways I get to do that, but that's what I find most satisfying. And as far as the challenges or the least enjoying aspects, I guess it would be, as our firm is in growth mode, I feel like I myself am in triage mode a lot. And so it's just every day, okay, what is the highest and best use of my own time? And there are lots of things I would love to do that sometimes don't always find the time to do. So that's a challenge, but we'll make it through, and everything will be done. It must be done.
Sure, and I would love for our panelists to kind of speak a little bit to the range of career avenues that are available to researchers and associates. As we can see from our panel, there's plenty of options available, and maybe let's go ahead and reverse order and start with you, Florrie.
Oh, wow. Maybe I'll go last, if that's okay. I have lots of ideas on that.
Absolutely. I feel bad. I've been thinking on Paul first.
I'll talk, because I was actually talking with one of our researchers in the office, and I think there's a lot that researchers can do. I mean, not only within your own firm. I mean, obviously all of us have had a type of career growth within our firm to continue to kind of grow up in search. But there's other things you can do outside of search. You can do marketing, you can do, I think it's your skills that you're learning in research can be transferable to any field. So find what you like, find a field that you like, and go in that direction. If it's not executive search or whatever type of search that you're in, I think that you find what you like and you can transfer those skills.
Yeah, at CTPartners, there's a number of options for a motivated and talented researcher. It could be staying within research, moving to a more senior level research role. We also have a title called Business Intelligence Manager. We have one here today, who sits atop the research team for each practice and really is the knowledge manager for that practice. And there's been a number of times when we've reached out to our BI manager for financial services, and they've been critical in pulling together information to help us move forward on a search. And then there's the recruiting aspect for those that want to get on the phones and feel like they want to take what they learned in research and apply it and be in the market. There's associate, director, principal, and partner. So a number of different paths to take within the firm. And I think to Wendy's comment, there's also client-side opportunities too. We probably all know someone who's gone from search over to work for a client. And I think that there are skills we're learning here in our business that a client could really benefit from. So that's always an option as well.
Josh, would you like to?
Yeah, I think a lot of the roles that I had in mind have been already mentioned. Those are all great ideas. A couple of others. Well, you mentioned associate director, director of research, knowledge manager. If you're not the type of personality profile, or you're not willing to exchange work-life balance to become a consultant, there are still other opportunities. And I think we have a couple of individuals here who are doing contract work for executive search firms, doing either name generation or candidate development, and that certainly is a good role. There's one right there, thank you. And then there also are folks who, as we mentioned, go to in-house executive search. And then I even know a couple of really former very, very senior associates and associate directors from a large firm that have started their own search-to-search business. And so they do search for executive search professionals like you all. And when search firms have openings, they'll go out and find the senior associates or knowledge manager or even consultants within certain practices. So that's a kind of interesting thing that they can do. And then private equity firms have their own executive search people as well. You all might know some folks who are doing that. That kind of counts as in-house or for corporate, but it's a little bit different. So I wanted to mention that as well. Did you have another idea?
Yeah, I have a question, because I know in some firms, and I know at Italian Winston they've played with it some, there they call it principal role. So it's, you're a candidate developer, but there's also, you're on a track where you could become a partner. And I was kind of curious whether or not any of you all had seen that model succeed, because it seems to be such a pull in terms of time, because you still have to satisfy the partners, and at the same time you need to do the BD part. So and I was just wondering if you actually thought that was feasible.
I think some of
Yeah,
these people-
I'm sure it's feasible. I mean, that's the path I'm on. So, within our firm, we have the administrative assistants, the researchers, the associate, senior associate consultant, principal. And so next year, I'm already on path to have a promotion for next year for the consultant role. And we have several people within our firm that are at my level or above, and one actually that is a senior partner now that started in research.
So does Witt give you time? I'm just curious. Does Witt give you kind of time so that you can dedicate to that, so that
It's all part of the learning, yeah. And so what's interesting about Witt Kieffer is we're kind of doing the job by the time we get promoted. So, when you're in research, you're starting to make some of the phone calls, to candidates and do a little bit of connecting and generating interest in a position and getting more exposure with
yeah,
the
I'm talking
clients.
about the BD part to the, where you're generating cold business. So
Yeah, we do that. A lot of that is more relationship based because we're so large and we have a large, client base. But once you've done work for a client and you continue to do good work for them, the model is partners end up passing those clients to someone who's more junior to them, and they go out and find more work, and so that's the progression.
I would love to know, we've had the in-house function mentioned a couple of times here, and opportunities within client organisations. What do you all think, and this is a question for all of you, differentiates a career with a retained executive search firm as compared to with a client organisation, maybe an in-house function?
Repeat that question.
Sure. I'd like to know what you think differentiates a career in executive search compared to maybe an in-house function work.
I would say you have so much more exposure from the executive search side, and it increases your networking. When you are with a client, I can't imagine they have the resources that you have as you would with the executive search firm. I'm sure they have some type of databases, a lot of regular journals, but the resources that we have available in our firms are tremendous. So I think that would be the biggest differentiator.
I would think also just the partnership with others in search that you can bounce ideas off of and come up with ideas together. I would imagine maybe on your own sometimes if you're doing in-house executive search.
At Heidrick, some of our most successful partners had run executive search or even broader recruiting organizations at client companies. The individual runs our global technology and services practice, ran EMC's talent organization. A woman here in New York, I think, worked at some financial services company. And she runs our communications practice here. So there are plenty of examples of people kind of going back and forth. I think the nuts and bolts are probably the same. One distinction that I see, and this is a bias, but it's my perception. The reason why I stay on this side, on the service provider side, and why it's so exciting to me is because what we do, what I do, when we all do, is what our business is. We're not a support function, we are the business. And from colleagues that I've had who've gone in-house, that's a big kind of eye-opener for them. They're doing the same thing, it's just as critical, the processes are the same, but suddenly they're in a support function. They're not the business, and that can be something to get over. It's not the same at every company, but that's what I see as the difference.
Great. Paul, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that's well said.
Okay, excellent. Well, in that case, I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. Would anyone like to start? So, yeah, thank you very much.
I would like to add to the previous comment, having gone into startup executive search function at Tenet Healthcare. Originally, we were in operations, which made a lot of sense. We were filling executive positions. We could be close to the business. But then a few years later, we got folded into HR, and that's where you really feel like a support function. And there's some parts of HR I would not say they're not important, but sometimes they're almost at a disconnect to executive search. And then the closer executive search got pulled to non-executive recruiting, the more challenges we had. So the department's still there today, but I just remember even in the early years joking about we have no time to do search. Because you think how many internal HR meetings and projects go on that search is not a part of.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Yep, just behind you there, Toby.
Are all your research departments in-house physically in your offices, in your headquarters, or do you ever hire people regularly but not just on a contract basis and they're not physically in your offices? And that's in the research side of things.
I think at Witt Kieffer, all of our researchers are in our Oakbrook office.
At CTPartners, we have research scattered throughout. We have a big cluster in our Cleveland office, our former headquarters, and in our New York office, our current headquarters. But then we also have outliers. We have strategic placements of research people in Chicago and Boston and other larger areas where we do a lot of business and need extra support. So we have it scattered, and it's mostly full-time support.
Well, in my firm, none of the researchers work in office. We're unique in that we're virtual, and so everyone works from home. And we do sometimes engage contract researchers to assist us as well, and they work from home also. It works well, and it really requires good communicators and people who are very process-oriented in order for us to be successful.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay.
Here's one.
Oh, sorry.
So I have, and I apologize to the group because this is something that's kind of vaguely formed in my brain and is perhaps a little to the sideways of the researcher kind of talent question, but I'm just curious to hear your perspective from the industry. So I started thinking about this with Laura's presentation where she was emphasizing all of the statistics about transparency and how information is more widely available, which we also touched on in this panel. And I really liked, Paul, what you said about access, perspective, and judgment, and the field being leveled in the access, that access piece. So I guess I'm kind of curious to hear from and this is where the question is still a little vague in my mind, so we'll work through it together. But how do you feel like your firms are adapting to the increased level of transparency? And I guess I'm also asking this from the perspective that I work at Heyman Associates, where we focus exclusively on communications positions, and so all of our clients basically are in a crisis of transparency, where they're saying our businesses that were previously not very transparent, we need now someone who can talk about us and do it well. So I'm kind of then applying that question to search. I don't know, did that make sense? That was a lot of concepts. I don't know if my question was clear, to be clear about. So how do you think that executive search firms can adapt in an age of transparency? Or what have you seen the effect there? Or is that something we're still figuring out?
I think it's probably something we're still figuring out, but I think it's very individualized as well, because you have, within our firm, we have consultants who are very, very, very transparent. I mean, they will tell their clients everything and their candidates everything. And my mentor has been like that, and so I tend to be more like that. I mean, when I interview a candidate for a position, I heard a good question at our table that it would be good to ask your client, what's negative now? Tell me what's negative and how I can answer that to a candidate who finds out about it. And I think that's a great question. That's something that I'm going to ask. But I do try to find out the good, the bad, and the ugly and share all of that. And I think in the interest of having a successful placement, you have to do that. If you're going to guarantee your placement and they get there and they leave in 9 months, I mean, we're redoing that search. So our practice is to tell them as much as we can that they need to know about the job and the client, and both ways. You know, I mean, and there's been times on the candidate side where maybe a candidate didn't disclose something and we found out, and we've had to tell them, you can't advance your candidacy. I mean, if you had told us about this and we could have managed it early, then it's something we could have dealt with. But find out from a different source, it doesn't look good. And so we've told candidates for that.
Yeah, I would just say, I think Josh made the point earlier about just the pure act of finding a name, because of more increased transparency, is becoming more commoditized. I would agree with that. But the other two parts of that equation, the perspective and judgment piece, that is not becoming commoditized. And that's where we still, I think, are the reasons why clients hire us. And it's also what you do with those names, right? On the client side, they don't have the time to find that name or call that name 3 times, or think creatively about how to engage a passive candidate who's very qualified, but maybe just isn't in the mindset of looking for a new opportunity. So I think the increased transparency is making us all more honest and having everyone up their game. But I don't think and I think to some degree the singles and maybe some of the doubles that our industry have relied upon over the years, some of that is going away. We tend to be doing more senior level, more strategic and opportunistic assignments, but I don't see the increased transparency or the LinkedIn boom drastically affecting our business.
Yeah, at a very tactical level, I don't know if this answers your question, but I think it's related to one of those points you made. I've observed over the last even few years, like 2-3 years, the deliverables that we give our clients are changing. You know, I'm sure everybody does the same things and just calls them different things, but you know, like one-pagers, right? Like that one-page profile that goes in a status report. You know, there was a time not too long ago where it would basically be like the profile and then like the regurgitated resume, like in like paragraph form right next to it. And you needed to do it because no one knew anything about these people, right? The client didn't know. That's not the way I do it anymore. And many of my colleagues, even with Heidrick, you know, it's much more focused on the judgment. You know, what's distinctive, kind of the why, the so what, rather than here's everything you need to know about this person. The same thing even with our write-ups. You know, we're seeing that change. Clients are expecting it to be much more, it's always had a heavy assessment component, of course, but you can go back in our system and look at these old write-ups, and 5 pages of it are telling you, like, well, and then, you know, he had a home run in that big game his senior year in high school, and like these big narratives that it's just about retelling the resume. That doesn't happen as often as it used to. So I think some of those things are changing. It's much more about to get to the point around the assessment and the evaluation aspect.
Great, so I think we still have a few minutes left, so if anyone else has any questions. Okay, well, in that case, I will take the opportunity to thank our panelists, Florrie, Josh, Wendy, and Paul. Thank you for joining us. It was a very interesting session.